In a
Baby, look at
world
me.
where love, trust,
Whatever
and
they said, it's
deception
not
collide,
true.
one boy's courage
I can
could
explain
save his
everything. Just
family
let me
from
talk
ruin.
to you.
Meet
How could
Leo,
you
a
lie
young
to
boy
me?
who, after losing his
Baby,
mother,
please,
must
it
face
wasn't
a
a lie.
new and terrifying
Just let me
challenge.
explain what happened.
A woman who wants to take everything his
Baby,
father
wait,
holds
please
dear.
just listen to me. It's not what you
As his
think.
father's
Not
new
what I
fiancée,
think.
Isabella, moves in, Leo
Everyone
senses
is
something isn't
watching.
right. But when he overhears a conversation that shatters his world, he risks everything to expose the truth. Will his father believe him, or will Leo's bravery be in vain? Tune in to find out how one child's voice stops a wedding, unravels a lie, and saves a family from a con artist's grasp. 5 years. In a child's world, that was more than half a lifetime. In a widower's world, time was no longer measured in days or months, but in voids. And David Miller's house, a modern marvel of glass and cedar that he himself had designed, was filled with such voids. The morning began with a ghostly routine. David, in his gray bathrobe, would step into the kitchen. His eyes were still heavy with sleep, but his hands moved with a memory of their own. He took 2 ceramic mugs from the shelf, one navy blue for him, the other a buttery yellow he placed gently beside the coffee maker. Only when the rich, dark scent of roasted coffee filled the silent kitchen would he snap back to awareness. He would stare at the yellow mug, empty and cold. Eleanor's mug. Damn it! He would whisper, his voice hoarse. He would put the mug away, but its echo remained. This house was a symphony of echoes. Eleanor's laughter seemed to linger on the high walls, her absent-minded humming, as she gardened, still drifted on the light breeze through the large windows. But they were just ghosts of sound. The reality was silence. A heavy silence broken only by the rustle of pages as his 9-year-old son Leo read, or the steady tap of keys from David's home office, where he built skyscrapers on a screen to escape the wreckage of his own life. Work was his fortress. In the world of blueprints of straight lines and sharp angles, everything had order. Concrete and steel knew no grief. They obeyed the laws of physics, not the erratic emotional tides that drowned him on sleepless nights. He was a successful architect, a respected name in Chicago, but every award he received felt like just another stone placed upon the grave of his old life. He had built a world for others, yet he could not repair his own. He loved his son. He loved Leo with a fierce, aching love, but that love was shrouded in a fog of pain. Sometimes when he looked at Leo, he saw Eleanor's eyes, her smile, and the loss would wash over him like a tidal wave, leaving him breathless. He knew he was distant. He saw the way Leo looked at him, a gaze of both worry and longing, but he didn't know how to breach the invisible wall between them. Grief was a selfish prison. And in that prison, David Miller failed to realize that the walls were slowly closing in, not to protect him, but to trap him in a darkness deeper than any sorrow he had ever known. Leo Miller woke not to an alarm clock, but to the silence. He had an internal alarm clock tuned to the rhythm of his father's sorrow. At 6:30 in the morning, he would slip quietly out of bed, his bare feet padding on the cold, hardwood floor, and crack open his father's bedroom door. He could tell if it was going to be a good day or a bad day just by the way his father was lying. If he was on his side slightly curled, it was a bad day. If he was on his back, an arm thrown across his forehead, it was a very bad day. This morning his dad was on his back. Leo let out a soft sigh, a sound far too old for his 9-year-old chest. He went back to his room, grabbed his tablet, and set 2 separate alarms on it, 5 minutes apart. The first was labeled, "Dad Coffee." The second, louder, was labeled, "Dad School." His mother, Eleanor, in her final fragile days in a hospital bed, had taken his small hand in hers. The smell of antiseptic was thick in the air. "Take care of your father for me, my little knight." she had whispered, her voice as thin as a silk thread. "He's going to need you to be strong." And Leo tried. He tried so hard. He was the one who poured the cereal into bowls on the mornings his dad forgot about breakfast. He was the one who made sure his dad's briefcase was packed before important meetings. He had even learned to perfectly forge his father's signature on field trip permission slips, because bothering his father with such trivial things felt like a crime. At school, when friends bragged about weekend plans with both their mom and dad, Leo would smile and tell a joke he'd read online. He was the keeper of the family's secrets. The secret of weekends when his father couldn't get out of bed, the secret of dinners where the two of them sat opposite each other in silence, each lost in their own world. He missed his mother. The longing wasn't a thought. It was a physical sensation, a cold hollow in the center of his chest. He missed the smell of her baking cookies, the way she read stories to him with different voices for each character, the feel of her warm hand stroking his hair. But he hid that longing just as he hid his fear. The fear that one day his father's sadness would swallow him whole, and Leo would be utterly alone. So he became a knight. A small knight fighting the invisible dragon of grief with simple weapons, a bowl of cereal, a reminder, and a brave smile. He didn't know that his greatest battle was yet to come. 18 months ago, Isabella Vance had swept into David Miller's life like a strange wind blowing away the thick dust of apathy. It was at an architectural conference in New York. David had just finished his presentation on an urban renewal project, a speech he delivered mechanically, devoid of emotion. And then she appeared during the Q&A. Isabella Vance. She wasn't just beautiful in a classic way, glossy black hair, deep blue eyes, and a figure that seemed sculpted into her designer suit. She was also razor sharp. Her question about sustainability in his design wasn't a platitude. It showed she had truly listened, truly understood. Later, she found him at the coffee bar. "Your designs are brilliant, David," she said, her voice as smooth as velvet. "But I get the feeling you're building a fortress to imprison yourself." The words struck a chord with David. For the first time in years, someone had seen past his professional veneer, had seen the man inside. And for the first time in years, he smiled. A real smile, one that loosened the facial muscles that had become rigid with grief. Isabella was a master. She knew when to listen, when to speak, when to place a light touch on his arm in a show of empathy. She spoke of her own losses, a carefully polished lie, creating a false bond. To David, drowning in an ocean of loneliness, Isabella was a life raft. Within 2 months, she had become an indispensable part of their lives. She brought expensive bottles of wine and dinners from fine restaurants. She praised his work, admired his intellect, and looked at him with an adoration he craved. She was a shock of color in his monochrome world. And David, desperate and lonely, clung to her with all his might. He didn't see the calculation in her eyes. He didn't hear the falsehood in her voice. He saw only salvation. A new dawn. He didn't know it was a false dawn before a terrifying storm. The first time Isabella came to the house, she brought Leo an expensive remote-controlled robot. "Hello, Leo," she said, kneeling to be at his eye level, her jade-green silk dress pooling on the floor. "Your father talks about you all the time. You must be a very smart boy." "Thank you," Leo mumbled, clutching his worn corduroy teddy bear. Barnaby, his mother's last gift. Isabella's gaze flickered to the bear, and for a millisecond her perfect smile faltered. A flash of annoyance, almost disgust, crossed her face before vanishing so quickly Leo thought he had imagined it. "A cute bear," she said, her voice still sweet. But don't you think you're a little old for stuffed animals? Leo hugged Barnaby tighter. My mom gave him to me. Oh, of course, Isabella said, rising gracefully to her feet and turning to David with a radiant smile. He's just adorable. But Leo had seen it. He had seen how her smile didn't reach her eyes. He had seen the way she glanced at his parents' wedding photo on the mantelpiece with a fleeting look of contempt. And so the invasion began not with swords and spears, but with subtle changes. First went Eleanor's pictures on the walls. They clutter the space a bit, my love, Isabella said, gently packing them into a box. We need to look forward, not live in the past. Next was the floral print armchair where Eleanor loved to read. It was donated to charity and replaced with a modern, cold, black leather chair. The rose garden that Eleanor had spent years tending was mercilessly dug up. In its place, a minimalist lawn and a few soulless landscape shrubs. The most painful blow was when his mother's handwritten recipe box disappeared from the kitchen shelf. When Leo asked, Isabella just shrugged. They were old and stained. I threw them out. That night, Leo cried alone in his room. He felt as if his mother was being erased piece by piece. And the worst part was, his father didn't seem to notice. He was so happy, so grateful to have someone that he was blind to everything else. When Leo tried to voice his concerns, David just ruffled his hair and said, I know change is hard, son, but Isabella is good for us. You'll see. Leo didn't see. He only saw the cracks appearing on the perfect surface of the woman his father loved. 6 months ago, David proposed. It happened at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the glittering Chicago skyline. There was champagne, a violinist playing their new favorite song, and a diamond ring so large it was almost comical. Isabella had cried. Perfect tears rolled down her perfect cheeks as she said yes. And David, his father, looked more radiant than he had in years. The sorrow seemed to have been washed from his eyes, replaced by a pure, undiluted joy. Leo, sitting there in his little suit, had clapped and smiled. He had said, Congratulations, Dad. Congratulations, Isabella. He had done all the right things, but inside he felt like he was watching a movie he didn't want to be in. He felt like his father was cheerfully walking towards a cliff in the dark. The unease inside him was no longer a vague suspicion. It had crystallized into a solid, cold certainty in his chest. This woman was a liar. The feeling was like the strange stillness in the air before a great storm, like a low-frequency hum that only he could hear. He tried to dismiss it, to tell himself he was just a selfish, jealous, scared kid, just as his dad said. He tried to believe in his father's happiness. But a child's heart has a primal wisdom, a compass not yet skewed by life. And Leo's compass was pointing directly at a single word, danger. What could a 9-year-old boy do against a diamond ring and a father's desperate happiness? Nothing. He could only watch and wait. He didn't know the storm was only 3 days away, and that he would be standing in the very center of it. 3 days before the wedding, they moved to Riverside Country Estate, an old mansion of stone and ivy that Isabella had insisted on for the venue. This place was nothing like their home. Their home had scratches on the hardwood, where Leo used to drag his toys, smelled of his father's coffee, and the dried lavender his mother still had in her closet. This place was cold. Long, silent hallways were adorned with portraits of strangers with judging eyes. The marble floors swallowed every sound, making Leo feel smaller and more alone than ever. That afternoon, his tablet went missing. It wasn't just a toy. It was his portal to the world, holding his games, his books, and most importantly, the history homework he needed to finish. He searched his room under the bed in the grand living room, but to no avail. Then he remembered. This morning he had been sitting in a corner of Isabella's private study while she was busy with calls and organizing papers. His presence seemed to annoy her, but with David nearby she had just smiled and called him her adorable little assistant. The room was at the end of a hallway on the second floor. As Leo approached, he saw the heavy oak door was slightly ajar. He was about to knock, but a voice from inside stopped his hand in midair. It was Isabella's voice, but not the melodic, smooth tone she usually used. This voice was sharp as a razor, cold and cruel. "Relax, Julian. As soon as I'm married, the money will be transferred. He's loaded. You'll get your share." Leo froze. Julian. Who was Julian? He'd never heard that name. A cold dread crept up his spine. He knew eavesdropping was wrong. His mother Eleanor had always taught him that. But there was something in Isabella's voice, a raw malice, that forced him to hold his breath and press himself against the wall. "No, he doesn't suspect a thing," Isabella continued, followed by a dry, bitter laugh. "By the time he figures it out, it'll be too late. He'll sign the papers and we'll be gone. I've waited too long for this. That pathetic widower and his annoying kid won't know what hit them." Pathetic widower. Annoying kid. The words stabbed Leo like shards of ice. She was talking about his dad and him. She was setting them up. She was going to take their money and leave. It was all an act. The blood in his veins seemed to turn to slush. The tablet, which he suddenly realized he'd been holding all along, slipped from his numb fingers. He scrambled to catch it, but in his panic, his elbow knocked against a decorative ceramic vase on a small hall table. Crash! The sound shattered the silence, loud and terrible. "What was that?" Isabella's voice turned sharp with suspicion. "Hold on, Julian." Leo heard the urgent click of high heels on the hardwood floor. She was coming. His mind went blank with fear. If she found him, if she knew he'd heard. He ran. His sneakers made no sound on the thick carpet as he bolted like a ghost. The door to the grand dining room was ahead. He darted through it, sliding under the massive mahogany table and pressing himself against one of the intricately carved legs. He curled into a ball, trying to make himself invisible. Just in time. Through the gap between the chair legs, Leo could see Isabella's glossy black heels appear at the threshold. They stopped. "Hello," she called out, her voice sickly sweet again. "Is anyone there?" Leo held his breath until his lungs burned. He could see the tips of her shoes just inches from the dining room. She stood there for a silence that stretched into an eternity. Leo was sure she could hear his heart pounding like a tortured drum. "Don't come in, please, don't come in, please." After a moment, Isabella muttered something and turned away. The sound of her heels faded back toward the study. Leo remained motionless under the table for at least another 10 minutes, his heart still racing. Her words cut through his mind on a loop. Pathetic widower. Annoying kid. She hated them. She had always hated them. Every smile, every kind word, every "I love you" she'd said to his dad was a lie. He had to tell his dad. Now. Leo found David in the master bedroom going over seating charts with the wedding planner. His dad was laughing a relaxed and happy laugh. For the first time in 5 years, the constant shadow in his eyes seemed to have lifted. Seeing that, Leo almost turned away. How could he destroy this precious happiness? But then Isabella's ice-cold voice echoed in his head. "By the time he figures it out, it'll be too late." "Dad!" He burst into the room, his voice frantic. "I need to talk to you. It's really, really important." David's smile faded, replaced by concern. Leo, son, I'm a little busy. Please, it can't wait. The urgency in his son's voice made David pause. He gestured to the wedding planner, and she quietly left. All right, what is it? David knelt to Leo's level, placing his hands on his shoulders. You look terrified. The words tumbled out of Leo in a torrent. I heard Isabella on the phone with someone named Julian. She said she's going to take all your money and disappear after you sign some papers. She's using you. She doesn't love you. She called us pathetic and annoying. David's expression shifted from concern to something else. Disappointment. Leo, what are you talking about? I heard her. I was looking for my tablet and I heard her. She's planning to trick you. David stood up, running a hand through his messy hair. Leo, I know you're struggling with this wedding. I know it's hard for you to accept Isabella, but to make up stories like this, I'm not making it up. Hot tears of anger and helplessness welled up behind Leo's eyes. Why don't you believe me? Because it doesn't make any sense, Leo, David said, sitting on the edge of the bed, his face weary. Isabella has been nothing but good to us. She loves me. She wants to build a family. I think maybe you just overheard her venting to a friend. People say things they don't mean when they're stressed, and planning a wedding is incredibly stressful. It wasn't like that. Julian isn't a friend. Honestly, Leo, this Julian could be anyone. Her accountant, her lawyer, a wedding vendor. You're taking one detail out of context and turning it into some grand conspiracy because you're scared. I'm not scared. But even as he said it, Leo knew it was a lie. He was terrified. Terrified of losing the only parent he had left. Terrified of being alone and terrified that no one believed him. David's voice softened. I know you're trying to protect me, and I love you for it. But Leo, you have to trust me on this. I'm the adult. I know Isabella. I love her and she loves us. Maybe she said something that sounded bad, but I'm sure there's a logical explanation. Dad, please. Enough. David's voice hardened. I don't want to hear any more about this. In 3 days, Isabella is going to be your stepmother. You need to accept that. But I heard, Leo, go to your room, now. The command hit Leo like a slap. His dad had never used that tone with him. Never. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he turned and fled the room in a blur. He didn't see Isabella standing just outside, tucked into the alcove by the tall grandfather clock. She had heard every word. As Leo ran past, their eyes met for a fraction of a second. And Isabella smiled. It wasn't her fake sweet smile or her perfect bridal smile. This was something else entirely. Cold, triumphant, and smug. The smile of someone who had already won and knew it. Then it was gone, replaced by a look of faux concern as she called after him. Leo, sweetie, are you all right? But Leo kept running. He ran to his room, slammed the door, and locked it. He collapsed onto his bed, sobbing into his pillow. His dad didn't believe him. No one would believe a 9-year-old boy over a beautiful, charming woman. Isabella was going to destroy their lives, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Unless he could find proof. Real, undeniable proof that even his dad couldn't ignore. Leo lay on his bed, still fully clothed, watching the red numbers of the digital clock dance slowly. 10:15. 11:30. Midnight. The mansion was silent, a living silence full of the creaks of old floorboards and the whistle of wind through the window frames. His heart was beating so hard he was afraid someone could hear it through the walls. This was a crazy idea. A 9-year-old sneaking through a huge mansion in the middle of the night to break into someone's room. But the image of Isabella's triumphant smile burned away all fear. If he didn't do this, his father would lose everything. He slid off the bed, moving like a phantom through the dark hallway, lit only by the faint glow of nightlights plugged in along the baseboards. Isabella's room was at the end of the east wing, past the library and the portrait gallery. It took him nearly 10 minutes to get there, every step an agony of suspense. The door, of course, was locked. A wave of disappointment washed over him. He knew it. Isabella was too careful. He was about to give up when a memory sparked. He had seen the housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, using a master key ring to open the rooms for cleaning. And she always hung that key ring on a hook in the kitchen pantry. That meant going all the way back down the stairs through the dark house again. The risk multiplied. But he had come this far. The journey to the kitchen was even more terrifying. Every shadow looked like a person hiding. When he reached the kitchen, the moonlight streaming through the windows turned everything a ghostly silver. He tiptoed into the pantry, and there it was, hanging on its hook, Mrs. Chen's key ring. The jingle of metal as he lifted it sounded like an alarm bell in the silence. He froze, listening, but nothing happened. He wrapped the keys in the hem of his t-shirt to muffle the noise and began the long journey back. Finally, he was standing before Isabella's door again. Heart hammering, his trembling hands tried key after key. The first didn't fit, nor the second, nor the third. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. On the 6th try, an old-fashioned brass key, it slid smoothly into the lock. Click. The lock gave a soft sound. The door creaked open. Leo took a deep breath and stepped into the darkness. Inside Isabella's room was obsessively perfect. Everything was neat, sterile, without a hint of clutter. The bed was made flat. The papers on the desk were in neat stacks. Leo began to search. The desk drawers held only contracts with wedding vendors' menus, seating charts. The closet was full of clothes, jewelry, cosmetics. Nothing incriminating. The fear that maybe his dad was right, that he had imagined it all, began to creep into his mind. Then he saw it. Tucked in the corner of the closet behind long evening gowns was a large designer suitcase. A packed suitcase. Why would she have a suitcase packed 2 days before her wedding? Unless she was planning to leave. Leo carefully pulled the heavy suitcase onto the floor. His heart was a jackhammer in his chest. He unzipped it. Inside were expensive, neatly folded clothes. But underneath the clothes, his fingers touched something hard and rectangular. It was a small metal box, the kind people use to store important documents. It was locked, of course. But Leo still had Mrs. Chen's keys. With shaking hands, he tried the smaller keys. Click. The box sprang open. What he found inside made his blood run cold. First, there were pictures. Lots of them. Isabella with the man he assumed was Julian. They were laughing, kissing, holding each other on a sunny beach. The back of one photo had Isabella's handwriting, "Mark and Veronica, Cancun last month." Veronica, last month. Isabella had told them she was in Boston, taking care of a sick aunt. She had sent pictures of hospital waiting rooms. It was all a lie. Leo kept digging his hands, shaking uncontrollably. There was a passport with Isabella's photo, but a completely different name, Veronica Reed. The birth date was different too. Multiple driver's licenses, all with her picture, but with different names and addresses: Jennifer Morrison, Sarah Blackwood. There were bank statements showing large deposits from sources labeled DM Trust and DM Holdings. David Miller. And then at the bottom was the worst thing of all. A legal document from an unfamiliar law firm. The title was clear: Power of Attorney and Asset Transfer Agreement. As Leo scanned it, his stomach twisted into a knot. This document would give Isabella full control over his father's company, his bank accounts, his property, everything. There were 2 blank signature lines at the bottom, and the date was already filled in Friday, the day after the wedding. Clipped to it was a handwritten note from Isabella. Get him to sign this at the reception. Say it's a standard post-nuptial formality. He won't read it. Leo felt sick. It was all real. He had to take this. He had to show his dad. With trembling hands, Leo took out his tablet and started taking pictures. Of every document, every photo, every fake ID. Some of the pictures were blurry, but he kept snapping until he had documented everything. Then he carefully put everything back exactly as he had found it locked. The box, placed it in the suitcase, and pushed the suitcase back into the corner of the closet. He had done it. He had the proof. Just as Leo turned to leave, he heard a sound that made his heart stop. Footsteps in the hall, coming closer. He looked around in a panic. The door, the closet under the bed. Nowhere was safe. The footsteps stopped right outside. He heard the jingle of a key. She was coming in. In a desperate reflex, Leo threw himself behind the large armchair in the corner of the room, pressing himself into the shadows, trying to make himself as small as possible. He clutched the tablet to his chest, barely daring to breathe. The door opened. The lights flipped on. Isabella walked in, still in her elegant evening dress, talking on her phone. Her voice was cold and calculating. The real Isabella. "I told you not to call this late, Julian," she hissed. "He could hear." A pause. "No, the kid was asking questions, but his idiot father won't listen. It won't matter after tomorrow anyway." Leo pressed himself tighter against the wall, trying to merge with the shadows. From his hiding place, he could see Isabella's reflection in the vanity mirror as she paced. "Yes, I have the papers ready," she continued, her voice dripping with contempt. "He'll sign them thinking they're just standard post-wedding paperwork. His lawyer won't even see them until we're long gone." She laughed, a cold, cruel sound that made Leo's skin crawl. "Of course I don't have feelings for him. He's a means to an end, Julian. A lonely, desperate man with a dead wife and too much money. The easiest mark I've ever played." She stopped listening. "Don't worry. By Monday we'll be on a beach in Belize and David Miller will be $50 million poorer. The kid will probably end up in foster care, but that's not my problem." Another pause, then a satisfied smile. "No, I don't feel guilty. People like him deserve to be taken. Too trusting, too naive, too stupid to see what's right in front of them." Leo bit his lip so hard he tasted blood. He wanted to scream, to jump out and tell her he knew everything. But he couldn't. Not yet. "I need to get some sleep," Isabella said finally. "Final dress fitting tomorrow, and I need to look perfect. It's exhausting playing the grieving widow." "All right, I'll call you tomorrow. Goodbye." She hung up. For a moment, her beautiful face twisted into an expression of pure greed and malice. She looked like a monster wearing Isabella's skin. Then she switched off the light and left the room. Leo waited in the darkness, counting slowly to 500. Finally, when he was sure she was gone, he crawled out of his hiding spot, his whole body trembling. He had heard enough. He had seen enough. And he realized something terrible: the proof alone wasn't enough. His dad hadn't believed him before. He needed help, an adult's help, someone his dad would trust. And suddenly Leo knew exactly who he had to call. Safely back in his room, Leo locked the door. He sat on his bed, his heart still pounding, clutching the tablet like a life raft. It was almost 1 in the morning. Too late to call anyone. But this couldn't wait. Clara Sterling, his mother's best friend from college. The woman who had been by his mother's side through the worst of it. Who had sobbed at the funeral as if she had lost a sister. And who, for the last 10 years, had been a detective with the Chicago Police Department. His mother had made Leo memorize her number. Just in case you ever need help and you can't reach your dad. With trembling fingers, Leo opened the video call app, turned the volume down to its lowest setting, and tapped on the contact, Aunt Clara. The call rang. Once. Twice. Leo's heart sank. She must be asleep. Then the screen lit up. Aunt Clara's worried face appeared, her dark hair a mess, her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. "Leo, sweetie, it's so late. Is everything okay? Where are you?" The genuine concern in her voice, the unfeigned worry broke something inside Leo. The tears he had been holding back for so long came flooding out. "Aunt Clara," he whispered, "I need help. It's about Dad's wedding. Something's really wrong." Clara's expression sharpened instantly. Her detective instincts kicked in. "Tell me, sweetie, what's going on?" The whole story poured out. The eavesdropping, his dad's disbelief, the break-in, and what he had found. He held up the tablet to show her the pictures. Clara silently examined each image, her face growing grimmer by the second. When Leo showed her the power of attorney and the fake IDs, her jaw tightened. "Leo," she said, her voice low but urgent, "listen to me very carefully. This is extremely serious. Your dad is in real danger." "I know, but he won't listen to me. He thinks I'm making it up." "I believe you, sweetie." Clara's voice was firm. "Everything you've shown me, the false identities, the transfer documents, the photos. This is a classic con. Your father is being targeted by professional criminals." Hearing an adult, a police officer, validate his fears was both a relief and a new terror. "What do I do?" "The wedding is tomorrow." "Today, technically," Clara corrected, glancing at a clock. "We don't have much time." "Okay, here's the plan. First, send me all of those pictures. Right now. I need them for evidence." Leo quickly did as he was told. "Good," Clara said. "Second, you absolutely cannot confront Isabella again. Do not let her know you have this. Can you act normal for the rest of the day?" I think so. She is not getting away with this. I promise you. I'm going to make some calls tonight. We'll run a check on this Veronica Reed. And I'm coming to the wedding." "Really?" A spark of hope ignited in Leo. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," Clara said with a determined smile. "And I'm bringing backup. We are going to stop this, Leo. But I need you to be brave for a little while longer. When the minister asks if anyone objects, do you think you can speak up?" Leo was stunned. To stand up in front of hundreds of people. "I know it's scary," Clara said, "but it might be our best shot. I'll be there to back you up. You won't be alone." Leo thought about it. Then he thought about his dad, about their home, about his mom. "I'll do it," he said, his voice small but firm. "I'll stop the wedding. That's my brave boy." Clara's smile was both proud and sad. "Your mom would be so proud of you, Leo. You're protecting your family just like she asked." After they hung up, Leo clutched the tablet to his chest. He was still scared, but he wasn't alone anymore. He had a plan. He had an ally. And tomorrow he was going to be a knight. The wedding day arrived, bathed in a brilliant, almost surreal light. Riverside Country Estate was no longer silent, but awakened in a fever of preparation. Florists hurried in with enormous arrangements of white roses, their sweet fragrance permeating the air. A string quartet tuned their instruments in the corner of the grand hall, their scattered notes taking flight like confused fledgling birds. The wedding planner, a woman with a headset and a clipboard, swept through the corridors, her sharp voice issuing commands to a team of staff. It was a dance of organized chaos, a well-oiled machine working at full capacity to create a perfect day. To Leo, that perfection tasted of deceit. He sat on his bed, the navy blue groomsman suit hanging on the closet door, like a silent accusation. The small, perfectly tied bow tie he would have to wear in a few hours looked like a small noose. His stomach was in knots. He had sent all the pictures to Aunt Clara. She had messaged back at the crack of dawn. Received. Don't worry, I'm on my way. Stick to the plan. The plan. It sounded simple, but living through every second until it was time to execute it was torture. There was a knock on the door. Leo, can I come in? Yeah. Leo replied quickly, hiding his tablet under the pillow. David entered. He was already in the white shirt and trousers of his tuxedo. He looked tired, but his eyes shone with a restless joy. Hey, buddy, he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. I wanted to talk for a minute before things get crazy. He didn't look at Leo, but at his own hands. About the other day. I'm sorry I raised my voice. I know this hasn't been easy for you, and maybe I haven't been as understanding as I should have been. A tiny spark of hope flickered within Leo. Maybe now he would listen. Dad, I wasn't making it up, David held up a hand, a gentle but firm gesture. Leo, please, don't. Today is my wedding day, the day we become a real family. For me, can you just try to put those fears aside just for today? He finally looked at him, and in his eyes Leo saw a genuine plea. He wasn't a bad father. He was a father desperately clinging to happiness. And that was even more painful. Okay, Leo whispered. Thank you. David smiled a smile of relief. He pulled him into a hug. It's all going to be okay, son. You'll see. We're going to be a family, the three of us. When David left, the feeling of being alone washed over Leo heavier than ever. His father didn't just disbelieve him. He was begging him to participate in the very lie that would destroy him. Half an hour later, as he was struggling with the bow tie, Isabella walked in. She looked like an apparition in a white silk robe, her dark hair swept up in an elegant chignon. Oh, you look so handsome, she said, her voice honey-sweet. She knelt and expertly retied the bow for him, her perfectly manicured fingers moving with practiced ease. Nervous, Leo? Yes. Leo lied. Isabella's blue eyes bored into him. The smile was on her lips, but her eyes were cold and calculating. Good, she said. Because today is going to be a very special day. A life-changing day, isn't it? Her fingers tightened on his shoulder just slightly, not enough to hurt, but enough to send a message. A warning. She suspected. She didn't know what, but she knew he was a problem to be managed. Vanessa, we need you for makeup, a voice called from the hall. Coming. Isabella called back, the sweet smile instantly returning. She stood smoothing her robe. She looked down at Leo one last time. Be a good boy, for all of us. Then she glided away, leaving Leo standing there, his heart pounding a rhythm of fear and determination. 3 o'clock. The music began. The mansion's grand hall had been transformed into a fairy tale cathedral. Thousands of white roses climbed the marble pillars. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the tall, stained glass windows, casting dancing rainbows on the floor. The air was thick with the scent of roses and candle wax. 300 guests sat in white chairs, murmuring and smiling. Leo stood in the antechamber with his father, trying to breathe evenly. The tablet, now backed up to the cloud and tucked in the inner pocket of Aunt Clara's coat, was no longer with him. He had only himself and a promise. "Ready, son?" David asked, adjusting his own tie one last time in the mirror. He looked so happy, a pure, unclouded happiness that sent a pang of grief through Leo. "I'm ready," he lied. Leo walked out first, carrying the white velvet pillow that held the wedding rings. Each step down the red-carpeted aisle was like walking on hot coals, the smiling faces of the guests blurred before his eyes. He had only one goal: find Aunt Clara. And then he saw her. Sitting in the very last row, dressed in a simple navy dress, she was almost invisible among the glamorous crowd. Beside her was a tall man in a dark suit, who Leo assumed was her partner. They both wore sunglasses, an odd detail indoors. As Leo passed, Aunt Clara gave him a slight nod, an almost imperceptible movement. But to Leo, it was like a lighthouse in a storm. He wasn't alone. He took his place beside the altar. And then the bridal march began. Everyone stood and turned. Isabella appeared at the end of the aisle. She was breathtaking. The ivory lace wedding dress clung to her perfect figure, its train flowing behind her like a milky waterfall. A delicate veil obscured her face, but through the thin fabric, Leo could still see her triumphant smile. She walked slow and regal, an angel of deception. The guests murmured in admiration. A few women dabbed at their eyes. Leo felt sick. They were applauding a wolf approaching its prey. When Isabella reached the altar, David took her hand, his eyes filled with love. The minister, an older man with kind eyes, began his speech. He spoke of the sanctity of marriage, a bond built on trust, love, and honesty. Leo almost laughed. He spoke of supporting each other through joy and sorrow, through prosperity and hardship. David and Isabella gazed at each other. To the world, they were the perfect couple. But Leo had seen the monster behind the beautiful mask. And then the moment came. "If there is anyone here who has a reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony," the minister said, looking out at the crowd with a gentle smile, "let them speak now, or forever hold their peace." Silence fell, a heavy, expectant silence. It was a formality. No one ever spoke. Leo's heart hammered so hard he thought it might explode. His throat was dry. He glanced toward Aunt Clara. She had taken off her glasses. Her eyes met his, steady and encouraging. It was now or never. Leo took a deep breath. "I object." His voice, young but clear, sliced through the cathedral's silence like a shard of broken glass. 300 heads turned as one. 300 pairs of eyes locked onto a 9-year-old boy, standing alone, his groomsman's suit, suddenly tight and hot. The silence was now deafening. "Leo!" David's face cycled through a series of emotions in seconds. Confusion, embarrassment, then anger. "What the hell are you doing? Sit down. Dad, please listen to me." Leo's voice trembled, but he held his ground. "She's lying to you. Her name isn't Isabella Vance." A shocked murmur began to ripple through the room. The minister looked utterly stunned. Isabella, behind her veil, went pale. Leo, that's enough, David hissed, humiliation flushing his face red. He stepped off the altar and toward his son. This isn't a joke. She's going to take everything and leave. Leo's voice grew louder, desperate. I heard her talking to a man named Julian. Her real name is Veronica. This is ridiculous, Isabella cried, her voice trembling, playing the victim perfectly. David, the boy. He's not well. I am not letting you ruin this day. David grabbed Leo's arm. I have proof, Leo yelled, wrenching his arm away. The move was instinctive, not part of the plan, but he had no other choice. I have proof. The boy isn't lying. A calm, authoritative voice came from the back. Everyone turned. Aunt Clara Sterling was walking down the aisle, followed by her partner. She had pulled out a badge and held it up. Detective Clara Sterling, Chicago PD, she said clearly. I'll ask everyone to please remain calm. Clara. David looked completely bewildered. What is going on here? David. Clara said, her gaze both professional and sympathetic. Leo came to me last night with some very serious allegations. We've been investigating. The woman you know as Isabella Vance is actually Veronica Reed, a professional con artist wanted in 3 states for fraud and identity theft. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. That's absurd, Veronica said, but her voice was laced with panic. This is revenge. She was always jealous of David's happiness. Is that so? Clara's partner, Detective Martinez, stepped forward. Then you won't mind if we check the contents of the locked box in your suitcase upstairs, Ms. Reed. The color drained from Veronica's face. Clara turned to David, pulling out a phone. David, I need you to look at these. These are the pictures your son risked himself to get. With shaking hands, David took the phone. Leo watched his father's face as he scrolled through the photos. The pictures of Veronica kissing another man. The pictures of the fake IDs. The pictures of the bank statements. And finally, the picture of the power of attorney contract. David's hands began to tremble. All the color left his face. What is this? David's lawyer, who had been sitting in the 3rd row, rushed forward. He looked at the phone screen and his expression darkened. My God, David, he said, his voice horrified. If you had signed this, you would have lost everything. The company, the house, the bank accounts, everything. The reality crashed down on David like a collapsing wall. He slowly turned to look at the woman he was about to marry. He looked at her truly, looked at her for the first time, and he saw the truth. Who are you? He whispered, his voice broken. I'm the woman who loves you, David. Veronica tried one last time, her voice desperate. This is all a misunderstanding. Don't lie anymore. David roared, a sound of pure agony and rage. Just stop! And then the mask shattered. Veronica's face transformed. The sweetness vanished, replaced by a cold fury. Fine, she hissed. She ripped off her veil and threw it to the ground. You want the truth? The truth is, you're pathetic, David. A lonely, desperate fool who was so easy to play, it was almost laughable. You and your nuisance of a son. I had this planned for months, and I almost had it all. The crowd was stunned silent by the sudden transformation. Julian and I were supposed to be in Belize by Monday. She shrieked, the anger of being caught making her reckless. Living on your money while you were still trying to figure out what happened. You're too trusting, too stupid. That's enough, Detective Martinez said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. Veronica Reed, you are under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit grand larceny. As Martinez cuffed her, Veronica began to scream and struggle. "This is a mistake, David. Tell them you love me." But David just stood there staring at her with a mixture of horror and heartbreak. Two other police officers entered, moving to escort Veronica away. As they pulled her past Leo, she snarled, "You'll regret this, you little brat. I should have gotten rid of you from the beginning." David instantly pulled Leo into his side, wrapping a protective arm around his son. The entire hall watched in silence as the con artist bride was led away, her beautiful wedding dress sweeping the floor like a broken dream. When the heavy doors closed behind her, silence descended. And then David fell to his knees, pulling Leo into a desperate hug. "You saved me," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "Oh God, Leo, you saved me. You saved our family." Leo clung to his father, and finally the tears he had been holding back for days came pouring out. "I just didn't want to lose you," he sobbed. "I already lost Mom. I couldn't lose you too." David was crying now, two tears of regret and overwhelming love. "I'm so sorry, Leo. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. I'm so sorry." And then a sound started. A single person clapping. Then another. Soon the entire room, all 300 guests, were on their feet applauding. They weren't applauding a failed wedding. They were applauding a 9-year-old boy, a little knight, who had risked everything to save his father. They were applauding true love. After the heavy doors closed behind Veronica Reed, a strange silence fell over the hall. It was not the reverent silence of a ceremony, but the empty silence in the aftermath of an explosion. 300 people dressed in their finest for a wedding now stood aimlessly amidst the ruins of a lie. The white roses seemed to wilt in the air. The wedding planner, her face pale with shock, timidly approached David. "Mr. Miller," she whispered, "all the food, the band, what should we do?" All eyes turned to David. For a moment, Leo saw his old father, the lost man, about to crumble under the weight of reality. But then something shifted. David took a deep breath, his hand still holding Leo's tightly. He looked around the room of confused faces, and then he looked down at his son. A small smile, trembling but genuine, touched his lips. "We can't let all of this go to waste," he said, his voice, though hoarse with emotion, echoing through the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize that you all came here for a wedding that didn't happen. But I will be forever grateful that you were here to witness something far more important. Today, my son taught me a lesson about courage and true love." He held up the hand that was holding Leo's. "So please join us. We won't call this a wedding reception. We'll call it a celebration of truth, a feast of life." The tension in the room broke. Someone laughed with relief. Someone else applauded. Gradually, the atmosphere shifted from horror to something warmer. They were no longer wedding guests. They were friends, colleagues, and family there to surround a family that had just survived an earthquake. As people moved to the reception hall, Aunt Clara pulled David and Leo into a quiet corner. "I'll need to take both of your official statements later," she said gently. "But for now, just be with your son. He's been through more than enough." "Thank you, Clara," David said, pulling her into a hug. "Thank you for believing him when I didn't." "You weren't just blind, David," Clara said, her tone direct but not harsh. "You were blinded by grief. You wanted happiness so badly, you were willing to ignore every red flag. Veronica is a predator, and you unintentionally made yourself the perfect prey." The words were a blade, but the necessary blade of a surgeon. David nodded, fresh tears welling in his eyes. He turned to Leo, kneeling to look directly into his son's eyes. "I am so sorry, Leo," he said, and this time the apology carried a completely different weight. "I'm not just sorry for not believing you. I'm sorry for letting my own sadness turn me into a bad father. I was so busy looking for someone to fill the space your mother left that I didn't see that the most important person in the world was already right here in front of me. You were trying to protect me when I should have been the one protecting you. I am so sorry." Leo said nothing. He just stepped forward and wrapped his arms tightly around his father's neck. In that embrace, 5 years of distance seemed to melt away. The invisible wall between them had crumbled. David held his son, breathing in the scent of his hair, and for the first time in a very long time, he didn't feel alone. That night, amidst the conversations and words of support, Leo watched his father. He was no longer a ghost gliding through social events. He was talking, listening, and occasionally he was laughing. A real, unforced laugh that reached his eyes. And every few minutes he would glance over at Leo, a look of immense pride, gratitude, and boundless love. The party went on, but for Leo, the day had ended in his father's arms. In the weeks that followed, their house began to breathe again. The suffocating silence was replaced by the sounds of life. The clink of cutlery at breakfast, the sound of David helping Leo with his math homework, the laughter as they watched a comedy. David had kept his promise. He left the office at 5 o'clock every day. He started therapy to confront the grief he had suppressed for so long. He also arranged for Leo to see a child psychologist, a kind woman who helped him sort through his own tumultuous emotions. Eleanor's pictures went back up on the walls, her smile once again warming the rooms. The house no longer felt like a museum of memory. It was a home again. One Saturday afternoon, while cleaning out a closet to make room for new things, Leo found it. Pushed into the very back corner behind a stack of old board games was a yellowed, cream-colored envelope. On it, in his mother's elegant handwriting, "To my brave little knight. Open when you are ready." His hand trembled as he brought it downstairs. "Dad, I found this." David was in the kitchen, and when he saw the envelope, his face went pale. "That's from your mother." They sat down on the sofa close together. With trembling fingers, Leo carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written a few weeks before she passed away. They read it together. "My dearest Leo, if you are reading this, it means you have found your courage. I knew you would. You have always been my brave little knight, even when you didn't feel like it. I am gone now, and I am so sorry I couldn't stay with you longer. But I want you to know something important. Always trust your heart, my sweet boy. When something feels wrong, it probably is. When someone's kindness doesn't feel real, it probably isn't. You have wonderful intuition. Don't ever let anyone tell you you're wrong for listening to it. Your father is a good man, but he will be lost for a while without me. He will need you to be strong to help him navigate. But remember, you are still a child. You do not have to carry adult burdens alone. If something is too big or too scary, find a grown-up you trust. Aunt Clara, your teachers, anyone who makes you feel safe. Always be honest, always be brave, and always, always trust your heart. I will love you forever across time and space and everything in between. Whenever you need me, just close your eyes and remember I am always right here in your heart, cheering for you. All my love, always, Mom." By the time they finished, both David and Leo were crying. Not tears of sadness, but of release of love and of deep understanding. Leo clutched the letter to his chest, feeling his mother's words like a warm embrace. "It saved us," Leo whispered. trusting my heart. She knew, David said, wiping his eyes. Even then, she knew you would be the one to keep us safe. She was right about you, Leo. She was right about everything. They sat there in a comfortable silence, holding each other, the letter between them, like a bridge connecting the past and the present. Life found a new, peaceful rhythm. One evening, David's phone rang. It was Detective Martinez. He informed them that Veronica Reed and Julian Croft, after a brazen escape attempt, had been recaptured in Florida, trying to pull another scam. With the new charges they were facing, a sentence that would last for decades. There would be no chance of parole. They were gone from their lives for good. The following spring, on a sunny Sunday morning, David and Leo were in the backyard. Eleanor's rose garden had been replanted. New bushes were budding, promising their first blooms. They worked together, pulling weeds, their hands dirty with soil, their laughter mixing with the birdsong. David paused, looking at his son. Leo was a little taller, his face no longer etched with constant worry, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced his dragon and won. In the past year, David had learned many things. He learned that healing wasn't about forgetting, but about learning to live with memories peacefully. He learned that happiness wasn't something to be found on the outside, but something to be cultivated from within. But the greatest lesson he learned came from the boy smiling at him. Leo had taught him that true love wasn't the absence of flaws, but the presence of forgiveness. That courage wasn't the absence of fear, but acting in spite of it. And that sometimes the smallest hearts hold the greatest wisdom. "You did good, partner," David said, clapping his son gently on the shoulder. "You too, Dad." Leo grinned. David looked up at the clear blue sky, feeling the warmth of the sun on his skin. Their house was no longer a place of echoes. It was a place of laughter. And he knew somewhere Eleanor was smiling too. He had been lost, but his son, his little knight, had shown him the way home.